Testing. Blah, 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 blah.
Ready, set, go.
It's time for the Coach Amy and Coach Liz show.
A podcast for endurance athletes by 2 athletes, 2 coaches, and a physical therapist.
We are your hosts, Coach Amy
And Coach Liz.
coming to you from
Kansas City.
Hi. Hi, peeps. We're back for another episode of the Coach Amy and Coach Liz show. Today we're going to talk about caffeine and sports performance. But, we're both... Are you highly caffeinated right now?
I mean, I feel like I just feel a little buzzy.
I think I over-caffeinate every time we podcast. And caffeine does
And I feel like
contribute
we
to
get
anxiety.
amped up anyway.
Right. Just the whole process is amping up. Speaking of the process of podcasting, so I was, there's this online, do they call it an online magazine when it's like a magazine or like, I don't know. Anyway, it's called Run Outside. Okay. But it's like an online, all right. Anyways, this is the second time I was interviewed with that, by them for an article. And this one was about like foam and foam rolling. And so when she asked me, what was interesting was that their readership liked the fact that it was a physical therapist talking about these things. So, and I said, well, we did a podcast on foam rolling, and I said, here, listen to it, right? And then she's like, oh, that's great, and everything. She goes, but can we set up a call so that I can ask you some questions? And I'm like, oh, what? Like the podcast wasn't enough? Like it didn't.
You were all indignant about it.
I was like, well, no. And I was like, okay, sure, fine. Okay. So anyway, she's super nice. And, she's asking me these questions. And I was like, oh my God. Like in that little short, like 15 minutes of her asking me these questions, I was like, wow, she drew a lot out of me about the topic that wasn't in our podcast. Okay. So then I go downstairs and I'm like, David, how come that went, I was like, it's so different. It's interesting. And he's like, perhaps maybe it's because she's a journalist and that's her job.
I mean, that's right. That's what I thought too. What did you think?
Well, I did think that, and then he confirmed that, okay, that's a thing.
I said, I was literally going to say, sound like she was a good journalist.
Right. And to note, we are not journalists.
No, we are not.
So, and the whole point of our podcast is that it's from the perspective of 2 athletes, 2 coaches, and a physical therapist,
right.
Not
a journalist.
Right. We don't have a journalist background. So you guys.
Oh. What the hell are we doing?
No, I think it's great that we provide. It's just
sometimes I feel like our cast should be called Who the Hell Knows. Just kidding. What the hell's going on?
Right, but I mean are we going to find, 2 journalists who are also 2 coaches, 2 athletes? I think it's awesome. That's not our goal is not to be this extremely polished podcast. It is what it is.
In case you thought we were.
And otherwise,
in
case you were brainwashed into thinking that we. Oh my gosh. But anyways, we hope you guys are enjoying the show.
Welcome.
And we hope you're enjoying the show. And we would still love to hear your comments and feedback about
is
who's
anyone
listening.
out there? Hello.
All right. So maybe we do talk about our topic now. So question for you, Liz, do you utilize caffeine when in racing for yourself personally, not your athletes or whatever? But I mean, it's a performance enhancement. Okay.
It is.
We know this from science. But how do you use it?
It's my answer to that now is different. When I first started, I didn't on purpose, or I thought it was good. And, I took the goos that I used. They were called, I think, Roctane at the time. I don't even know if they're still.
That sounds powerful.
Well, there was, it'll do a number on the GI, and I took a lot of caffeine. And I get that from athletes. Sometimes they'll, wonder why the Reds' golden rule is don't crap your pants.
Yeah.
Don't poop your pants. And sometimes, caffeine will do that. So I don't as much intentionally use it now.
So your fuel and hydration sources you don't intentionally choose caffeine.
I don't, just because I don't feel like I need it, but I know people who do, and there's there's stuff that shows.
Yeah we'll talk about that. Okay, I was just curious what you do. So as I mentioned, caffeine is a performance enhancer, particularly in endurance sport, because it acts on the neuromuscular system when it is fatigued, which, guess what?
So,
So it's like your 100-yard dasher isn't going to be, let's fuel with caffeine. And like, yeah, so I knew, so when I was preparing for this episode, I was like, God. I could hear you in my brain going, but how? How does it work?
Oh my God.
Okay, so here's how it works, y'all. And this is, if you want to dig into all the things that are happening on the biochemical level, go ahead. It's super interesting if you're into that. But basically how it works is it causes the release of neurotransmitters, okay, which are chemicals in the brain. And those neurotransmitters impact us in several ways. So it mediates pain during high intensity exercise. So basically it stops that pain inhibition. So, and we're not talking about pain like injury pain.
Right.
Okay? We're talking about the endurance, the fatigue sort of pain, which then causes an inhibition of the muscles. So caffeine is inhibiting that process, or mediating that process, which that obviously would could help you with your performance. Here's another one. It improves mood. So dopamine, serotonin, those happy chemicals. It's impacting that, and so that will decrease your rate of perceived exertion because your mood has changed there. And then it improves focus, which is like one of the reasons that I drink it every single morning to to like function. So, and then by doing, like, who cares if it improves our focus in an endurance race or training? But if you remember, what was our recent podcast episode that we released? But in the past, we've talked about how, you want to be paying attention to your form, and we want to be making smart decisions. Decision-making processes are important. I think it was our episode where we were talking about the red zone. And that whole, like, making those smart decisions that you practiced in training, but because you're so tired, you're not making good decisions. But at that point in the race, and that's when it's most effective, is that caffeine then helps improve that focus and that you can make better decisions. So fascinating how many facets it affects. But let's talk about the impact on the brain. Okay, so there was this research study I was reading called Caffeine Expectancy Does Not Influence the Physical Working Capacity at the Fatigue Threshold. Okay, we'll have a link to it in there. They're such long names.
They are.
But basically, what they did in this study is athletes who were told they were consuming caffeine and actually received that caffeine had significantly higher power output than those who received a placebo. Okay. And that was just confirming kind of, we know it impacts performance.
Right.
Okay. But interestingly, those who were told they were receiving caffeine but received a placebo also performed better. So in conclusion, there's the impact on it's powerful on the mind as well.
Well, and that goes back to like mindset and how much your mindset affects performance.
Yeah. So in conclusion, the mind is as powerful as caffeine. But this sort of impact on your rate of perceived exertion, okay, and impact on the mind, it might explain why caffeine helps us in heat and altitude. So like heat and humidity conditions. I know for me, please bring on the caffeine. I would want it because that is when I have this. I know it's impacting me physically, right? But there's the whole component of how the mind is perceiving that and how much worse you feel. And if you can have a change from this caffeine or something like that on your rate of perceived exertion drinking, you might perform better.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I always thought that caffeine impaired hydration status. It doesn't.
Right. I think we think of that because it's a diuretic. We think of it as being a diuretic.
Yeah, and it will make you have greater urine output, but it is not making you dehydrated during a race.
Right.
So I thought that was really interesting. So it doesn't exacerbate dehydration. You might be dehydrated for other reasons,
right?
But it's not because you had a dose of caffeine in your fuel.
Right.
Okay.
And you're going to talk about dose because if you are taking so much that you end up with diarrhea, that's a different conversation.
Absolutely. The other thing it doesn't do is it doesn't impair thermoregulation, so your ability to adapt to that heater. And again, I don't know why. I had this perception that it does, but there's no science to show that.
That's interesting.
So it's not dangerous to take it in the heat. And again, we're not sure, but the way that it may be impacting and working is that it's impacting your rate of perceived exertion. There's an interesting study where caffeine did not improve performance in the heat, but it did improve the rate of perceived exertion in males, but not females, which I thought was...
Oh, that's interesting.
We'll put a link to that one. Now, there wasn't a great pool of people that were tested. But as we know, there's a lot more research is done on men and not women. And so we're just now starting to include, that there's a difference between the sexes.
Right.
So at least, just throwing that out there that that study is out there. Okay. Impact on altitude.
That's interesting.
I know. It helps reduce negative effects of hypoxia, likely because it reduces our rate of perceived exertion again. So again, it's that impact on the mind and the brain.
That's so interesting. Does it have anything to do does caffeine make you vasodilate? Does it affect anything like that?
No, it does the opposite.
It's the opposite.
So you would think that, oh gosh, don't, but there was no, at least it's not maybe even studied enough, right, to be able to conclude that it's doing anything on the physical level. It's more of that sort of, the mental level, but we know that mental is physical and that it's affecting the biochemistry in the brain. So your, if you're feeling like it's this is an 8 out of 10 effort, and because you're at altitude, but the caffeine then is impacting those neurotransmitters in your brain, the serotonin and the dopamine and the feel-good mood, right? Your ability to handle that added work because you're at
really
altitude is
your
dampened.
Perception. It's not necessarily physically doing anything.
Yeah, it is physically on the mind.
It's on your brain.
On your brain.
Not necessarily it's not like your heart rate is different or that is really interesting.
I know. So cool. All right. Now, there's a caveat to how caffeine is impacting your body because it's everyone's metabolism is different. Everyone's genetics are different. So your reaction to caffeine could be very different from your friend's reaction to caffeine, how it benefits you. And then I won't go into all the details, but if you're taking other medications for other things, blah, 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 there's an interaction. So, but basically what it means is that the timing and the amount will vary, and even the impact on your performance will vary. So what do we always say? We have to experiment in training, practice, right? So you're not going to just show up on race day and start ingesting caffeine.
I know. Well, I've had that and I think because sometimes it's in products, and especially if you're new, people don't necessarily know that that's a thing, and so you can end up taking a bunch of gels on your run, and you've tried that in training and you knew that the gel worked, but that there's caffeine in it, and then you end up you're out there for 2, 3, 7, 8 hours running, and you're taking these gels that have caffeine in them, and it will make you shit your pants. Yeah. Right. And so you do need to be mindful of whether or not your product has caffeine, and then how you're.
Yeah, because you could go, and I've had this. I've done this before a long time ago, where I would just grab these goos off the shelf.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize there was one of them had it says at the top caffeine 2 times.
Exactly.
And it's and I wasn't really looking at that. I didn't notice that.
Yeah.
And so just being aware of reading the ingredients and understanding what's going into your body
and how much of it you're taking. So if it's maybe if it works in training for your training run, that is great. But if you're race day is a little different, and so it's like you may be out there for so much longer, and so taking in that much more caffeine it's a little different.
You have to time it correctly, and the amount is important. So let's talk about that. There are many different sources of caffeine that we could use. So it could be in a beverage, it could be in a bar, a gel, a chew, and even gum. And I've heard about the rinses also. And when I looked into the research of that, there's not a lot of research to show that that's actually helping with the oral rinses. So I'm going to kind of leave that one out. But the amount that's recommended is 3 to 6 milligrams of caffeine per kilogram of body mass. So y'all can do the math. I'm not going to do that for you, and I'm not going to convert it to pounds.
Well, so I feel like,
Are you going to do quick mental math?
I am, because
I'm so proud of you.
Well, I'm trying to think, like, if you're 60 kilograms, which is like roughly like 130, 135 pounds. I can't do it exactly. So 60 kilograms, and like, so let's say you do 3 milligrams of caffeine if you're 60 kilograms. So what, 9, that's 180 milligrams of caffeine.
Don't question me. I'm not checking that math work.
It is. It's 180.
Okay.
Is that per hour or is that total?
That would be a dose. So we'll talk about frequency and when to do it. And again, that's going to come into practice anyways. But the optimal timing of the intake is in the later stages. Okay. So that's when you're reaching the fatigue. So you think about so this is how I work it out, is that I'll have a cup of coffee an hour before, because I want to help that gut from before the race, right?
Yeah. Do we know how much caffeine a normal cup of coffee has?
They're all different though. So that's the kind of tricky thing with like the coffee.
Okay.
But like probably I wonder what's in my coffee today, and I've had like 2.5 cups.
Oh my gosh!
And I'm jittery, like my hands are shaking. Yeah, I'm having to slow down my speech.
Oh my gosh! Okay, go ahead.
So I probably ingested too much, and if I had taken this much in before a run, it probably wouldn't have been great.
Okay, but I just did a quick math.
Oh, you did a quick math.
Well, because I wanted to know roughly like what's a cup of coffee for caffeine, and this says about, who the hell knows? Coffee is so different. But just for frame of reference, like this says about 95 milligrams per cup of coffee. Could be all over the board, but that way so 180 milligrams, we just...
Yeah, but but here's the thing.
Yeah.
It's how you process that coffee and how you brew it. It makes a difference.
Yes.
And I have a story about that, because I have an athlete.
I just I never really paid that much attention. So I just wanted a ballpark.
Ballpark, average, whatever. Okay, so we talked about it, so you might take it an hour before your race, to help you kind of void and clear your gut. So then let's talk about, so that might be your beforehand, but and it can help kind of increase your focus again and all that kind of that sort of race start. It might help with that. It might boost your anxiety if you're not having enough of it before a race.
In which case we've got other problems, but go ahead.
Right, but so you're not really going to be taking that cup of coffee for performance at the beginning of the race. That's not when you're taking it in the later stages. And then how quick when to take it is going to depend on which source you chose. Because what if you chose, we'll talk about the gum, but there's going to be faster acting sources and slower acting sources. Okay. So, if it's something that's going to begin in 5 minutes, and start in 5 minutes and peak in 45, the timing of that's going to be different than the one that starts 30 minutes later, So this is where it's going to be different for different people. Right. And this is when you practice it. Right. When did I feel that effect? All right. So there's some careful considerations that we need to make. So caffeine does impact the cardiovascular system. Okay. So those with high cholesterol, hypertension, high blood pressure have a higher risk of rhabdomyolysis, which we've talked about in the past. It's a condition that can occur, we'll put a link in the show notes for more information about that. Increased risk of blood clot, and then muscle cramping. And that's because it's affecting blood flow. So if you already have these cardiovascular conditions, you need to understand that caffeine is going to impact those. So you have to be careful about whether or not you're going to take it. What are you're frowning?
I know. I'm trying not to get you. I feel like you're trying to do your podcast and I'm always like yanking you off in 1,000 directions. But I'm thinking about, well, later into a race and like the risk of cramping goes up. Either it can be from fatigue or from like, some form of dehydration. Maybe it's a water imbalance, salt imbalance, electrolytes. What is that a risk if you then put caffeine on top of that? Or are you talking about somebody who's like having muscle cramping for reasons that are not
for cardiovascular reasons?
Okay, so medical cramping,
right.
Not like race cramping. Okay.
Yes.
I just want okay.
Yes. Good clarification. Okay, so caffeine can raise your blood pressure by blocking a hormone that keeps your arteries widened and opened. Okay. But so so that's not great. So if you're someone who has exertional compartment syndrome issues, if you're someone who has blood pressure issues already, then caffeine would not be great. So it's not that if you're, otherwise healthy and normal, we don't have to worry too much about that. And plus we're not going to take too much, right? Okay, now here she goes.
I know, you can cut this out.
No, on.
Well, it's constricting those things, right? You said it's constricting. It's like, is that part of why your heart rate goes up when you drink caffeine? Right. Because it's constricting, and then your heart rate's like, we don't have the same amount of blood flow, and so your heart rate goes up.
And it's affecting the blood pressure, so that's a whole thing.
Oh,
yeah.
Well,
but again, that's why we wouldn't want to take too much of the caffeine, right? You don't want to overdose on the caffeine. But if you already have pre-existing issues, we don't need to add the caffeine to that. The caffeine might make things worse for you, and you won't have performance enhancement.
I've had many a therapist be like, have you considered decaf, Liz? I'm like, why? Why would I take decaf?
Oh, okay. So I have a good story about this because I have an athlete / patient, and he suffers from exertional compartment syndrome.
Okay, what is that? You'd explain.
Okay. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. Oh gosh, that's a whole other episode. We need to do an episode on that.
We do, because I was actually met with an athlete last week who was maybe, and she was like, I think that would be an interesting.
And and there's the chronic form, I'm not talking about the emergency form where oh my gosh we have to have an emergency fasciotomy and but this is when the fascia is bound down and tightens and it's like putting a constriction around the muscles, and that is affecting blood flow then to the limbs when you exercise. So it's chronic exercise-induced compartment syndrome. Mm-hmm. And symptoms of that would be like, numbness, tingling in the feet, severe pain in the feet, pale looking limb, we're not receiving enough blood flow. It's really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But here was this interesting thing about this patient. So we've been working through those issues, and all the different things that you can do to try
and generally
to help.
It's around, it's often, like
oftentimes it's in the calf.
Yeah, it's in the calf.
And so it's like usually bilateral. It might be worse on one side than the other. So this guy, with my new PT and primary care skills.
From your class that you did an excellent job with.
I finished it. I checked I just was checking his blood pressure and it was high. So we've got like stage 1. It's like, okay, it's a little bit high. Stage 2 is high. We need to see a doctor. We need to contemplate medications and different kinds of things. It was stage 2. I was like, okay. And I was like, maybe it's white coat syndrome. So you guys, white coat syndrome is like when you're nervous and elevated blood pressure at the doctor's office kind of thing. And so, I encouraged him. I'm like, hey, you know what? This isn't great. This is stage 2. We got an issue here. And so my recommendation, I'm going to have to close this door, block hubby's Zoom call there. So I encouraged him to like, hey, why don't you go, let's monitor this at home. Let's have you buy one of those relatively inexpensive units and monitor at home. These are your options. Or you can go to the doctor in next week. Like, we're not waiting months to get in. We're going to, follow up with the doctor, or let's monitor it a little bit. And he chose to monitor it at home. And it was like even a little bit higher at home. And so I was like, okay. But what he noticed was he was drinking a lot of caffeine.
Yeah.
Okay. And we're talking like the way he was brewing it, how much he was getting, that he was doing it throughout the day.
Oh.
There were other sources besides coffee of caffeine. And when he went down to a more realistic or safer dose, his blood pressure dropped.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yes. And guess what else stopped happening?
The compartment syndrome. Get out.
Nope.
No.
So there's more than one contribution to it, right?
Right.
But the restriction on the blood flow, what I mentioned earlier, was where it has an impact on the vessels being constricted more.
Yeah.
So he was having caffeine in the afternoon and running in the afternoon. And so he was, or caffeine before a long run. So that was impacting already the fact that, okay, maybe we have some tight compression of the fascia around those calves, and that's impacting blood flow. And then let's add the caffeine on it.
Oh my gosh. And so then you were able to figure
elevating
out
his blood pressure, all the things. Yeah. So when we eliminated that, a lot of his calf cramping or calf pain issues have gone down as well.
Well, good for you.
Win.
That's really exciting.
Like, yeah. So anyways,
for both of you guys
can see just kind of a case study of how caffeine impacted this person.
And your new skills paying
My
off.
new skills. Okay. Now, all that said,
Yeah.
we are not diagnosing you all. We are not your medical provider.
Yeah.
So if you are dealing with any sort of, blood pressure, cardiovascular issues of any kind, let's chat with the doctor before you use caffeine as a performance enhancement.
Good, yeah.
Or your healthcare provider, whoever that may be. Check with them. All right, you've already mentioned a couple of times in this episode the impact of caffeine on the gut. So it stimulates the gut, which is one reason why all of us athletes are drinking that cup of coffee before the run so that we can get the runs out before we start the race. But if you already battle runner's trots issues, regardless of whether you voided beforehand, caffeine is probably not going to be a good performance enhancer for you. You need to probably leave it out because it's going to cause, like you said, dehydration. You're either stopping and squatting and on the side of the road or whatever, or in a porta potty, and that's affecting your time anyway. So why are you using it?
Well, that's a good point. And for triathletes who don't start out with the run, but if you're somebody who panics in the swim, you may want to consider the fact that if you're taking in coffee and it's making you more amped up
and jittery.
Just
interesting to note. And plus the swim's in the beginning anyway, so in terms of a caffeine performance enhancement, it's kind of early in the game anyway for how it's going to help you in a triathlon.
Correct. And people just want it in the morning, and they do want it to clear their gut. So they do use it to clear their gut. But if you are using it for that and you have panic tendencies in the swim, you just want to be a little careful with that.
Yeah, I wonder, I did not look up what the clearance is. So, so clearance is like a term we use for like medicine or drugs or whatever. Half-life and all of that.
So I was just listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
It was this neurobiologist. She's a gal who actually does neurobiology of the brain for women in menopause. Rich Roll interviewed her. I'll put a link in. It's a fantastic interview. But for some reason, they were talking about caffeine and the half-life of caffeine.
Oh, good. So we know what it is.
We do. Well, if I'm going to see if I can remember correctly. But it was like, it's like if you shoot, her example was if you drink it at noon, by 6 p.m., it's halfway out of your system. By 9 p.m., it's like another half-life. Whoa. So it has a pretty long half-life. So it stays in your system.
Sticking around.
It does. I mean, I was really surprised at how long it stayed in your system. And I remember it's like if you drink at noon, you still have like half of it in your system by 6 p.m., I think is what it was. I'll put the link in the show notes. But it was a long time.
But it's interesting then too is like, well, okay, that's the half-life, but at what point is it is it impactful in terms of our performance?
That I don't know.
Or impactful in terms of any sort of negative side effect as well.
And hers, she was talking about sleep, especially for women in menopause. So
let's not go to sleep.
Well, I'm thinking about so it must still, with that half-life, obviously the effects would continue to be diminished. So in terms of performance, I don't know how long you would feel that, but...
Yeah. Okay. So there is something that you could try and consider, and that is the gum as caffeine source because it's very quick acting, and it bypasses the gut. Now, some of it does get in because you're swallowing a little bit, will go to the gut. But since a lot of it bypasses the gut, the way that it enters your bloodstream is through your glands and your cheek, the blood vessels, capillaries in your cheek. And then it might have less impact on runners, trots, and gut issues. So it would be something, again, we experiment in training.
And you could buy the caffeine gum, or they call it runner's gum or something. I've used that.
You have?
I have.
I've never seen it or tried it.
Yeah. I mean, it was...
I'm going to try it because, I'm not running and exercising long enough right now to need it.
Well, you could give it a whirl.
But I might try it when I'm running a little bit longer. I'm curious how it works and see if it affects the gut.
At work in the afternoon and just pop it in and see if you can feel it. Feeling a little drowsy at work.
I'm going to try it in the morning instead of caffeine. That way it doesn't cause me insomnia.
You should try it at 7 p.m. and see. Can you sleep?
Thanks, Dr. Liz. What great advice.
I'm here to help.
All right. So what's our takeaway today? Caffeine may improve your performance, but individual results will vary.
And
so practice.
And don't poop your pants.
Golden rule of the Reds Tri-Team.
Thanks so much for listening. And remember,
we are in this together. Until next time.